Stick figures, role-playing games, and a heavy dose of spaghetti western antics. Who would have thought that such a seemingly disparate combination of concepts could fit together so well? I guess with simplicity comes a world of possibilities, and with just the right amount of creativity, you can transform a few black lines on a white background into a work of art. Especially if you have a sharp sense of humor. Well, my dear backloggers, this time on the Backlog Odyssey, we're taking a look at the game that doesn't hesitate to flick its bean and fish around in unwholesome spittoons until the cows come home, West of Loathing. So securely fasten your spurs, and don't forget your fungicide bombs, because it's time for another backlog review. West of Loathing is a 2D black and white RPG with a hefty allotment of rootin' tootin' cowboys, stick figure cows, and whiskey-wielding doctors. And let's not forget an endless font of witty dialogue, which was developed by Asymmetric Publications and originally released in 2017 for PC, with an eventual arrival on the Nintendo Switch less than a year later in 2018. Touted as a follow-up to their previous title, Kingdom of Loathing, a browser-based online RPG, Asymmetric set out to create a much more self-contained game that could stand on its own. Only this time around, it would be Western-themed while still being set in the Loathing universe. That, and Asymmetric really wanted to approach the development of West of Loathing with a made-out-of-jokes mantra. That is, they wanted to make a game that didn't simply have comedic dialogue and jokes found throughout it, but instead a game that oozed humor from every corner of its world. From cans of tuna found in cacti, to the skewed hoofprints your crazy-eyed horse would leave behind while you travel from location to location on the map. It all needed to be silly and fit into the already ridiculous scenarios you find yourself in, and from the second you create your character in West of Loathing, it's apparent they were successful. In West of Loathing, you play as, well, yourself. Actually, it's more like a stick figure version of yourself, and in my case, a female stick figure version of myself. A bean-forward beanslinger who's ready to leave the nest and make a name for herself by traveling west. It's going to be a much bigger feat than just trying to figure out which rundown motel you're staying in though, because you'll have evil necromancers to usurp, ancient alien technologies to decrypt, and 1,000,001 errands to carry out for complete strangers as you venture toward the fabled Frisco. At least you can take solace in the fact that you'll be completely sloshed on cactus beer 98% of your trip. If I was to sum up West of Loathing in one sentence, it would be that it's an elegantly uncomplicated, endearing, and addictive game. I find myself humming along with its fantastically composed and whimsical Western-inspired soundtrack hours after I shut it off. And although at first glance, its simple stick figure aesthetics didn't wow me, once I spent a little time wandering the world of West of Loathing, I started to see how truly remarkable it really was. How much character you could extract from a few lines in a circle for a head, and how much variety there was between the people you met, the enemies you fought, and the environments you explored. Then, when you take it all in as a singular and coherent whole, it all comes together perfectly. That, and it suits the quirky shenanigans you'll encounter from start to finish. But if you look just below the surface, you'll see that West of Loathing is actually much deeper than it's letting on. Sure, you have your standard RPG mechanics and a plethora of quests to complete like any other RPG, but West of Loathing is much closer to an adventure game than your traditional role-playing game, where the battle system is primarily used to spice things up here and there instead of being a focus. And more often than not, you can avoid a fight if you play your cards right, or drink the right amount of booze. Items that are seemingly unimportant can have more meaning than you think, and the focus on stat juggling is fun and rewarding. It makes you stop and think before you go in guns blazing, wondering if you could have done something different to reach an alternate conclusion, like not throwing the fungicide at the goblin in Boring Springs. It all seemed overwhelming at first, what with there being requests thrown at you left and right with no real quest log. and you will find yourself aimlessly wandering sometimes, trying to stumble upon the proper key items. But honestly, that's where I got most of my enjoyment out of the game. My only real issue with West of Loathing was its overly simple battle system and its open-ended ending. When it came to combat, it never asked much of me, and I probably only used one or two of my character's abilities through most of the game. That and my partner never really seemed all that useful, except for maybe when I acquired the bone saw ability. I could dismantle skeletons with reckless abandon. Then it just kind of ended with no real fanfare. There was no final boss battle or conclusion to the story that felt like it tied up all the loose ends. You did get to watch a short cutscene detailing all the things you accomplished, but that was about it. You are also able to go out and finish up any quests you might have missed after watching the cutscene, and I did, but then when I cleared those up, it just felt like I was dropping the game instead of truly completing it. Minor quibbles, really, but it left me a little dissatisfied. With all that being said, I truly enjoyed my time with West of Loathing, and I would recommend any RPG fan with a thirst for nutty humor to check it out. It's a fantastic game to pick up and play with very little effort required to do so, and it'll keep you laughing until those credits roll. It's not often I use the phrase hidden gem, but in my mind, this is absolutely one of those, and I urge all of you to check this one out. Just make sure you don't drink too much of that tainted milk.